This video is made possible by the Eliason Group, an Agile consulting service. You can locate the video under Follow Us, then select Recent Videos on YouTube on the agilenewengland.org website.
Tonight's speaker. So our speaker tonight is the amazing Julie Bright. We got some nice pictures of her all around the room. There she is, right there. Hi, Julie. So Julie's visiting from her home in Virginia. She came all the way up from Virginia for us tonight. Really long way to come. We're really grateful that she can be here. She works in Virginia as a lead agilist within Capital One. I first met Julie at the Agile Games Conference a couple of years ago. You all know about the Agile Games Conference, right? Okay, so I first met her there. During our open space, someone at the conference convened a session about things that make you feel uncomfortable. So naturally, I had to check it out. And we were doing a bunch of activities to explore discomfort. I offered one to the group. It was 2 minutes of silent eye gazing. And Julie was my partner. It turned out it was a little uncomfortable. It was also a really great way to make an awesome new friend. So Julie's been a really good friend since then. Julie is an amazing speaker. She's a rising star in the Agile community. We're really glad that we can have her with us tonight. Here she is. Let's welcome Julie Bright.
Thank you, Richard. That was so nice. Actually, the first time that I saw you was the first part of that conference, which was the mob programming conference that preceded, or maybe it was afterwards. You were a keynote speaker for which one?
For the Games Conference.
For the Games Conference, right? So Richard's keynote presentation was about the core protocols, which you may have heard him talk about before. And what really struck me about that was that it came from such a place of kindness and compassion and connection. And that's what really is the most important thing about Agile for me. Like, you know that as Agilist, you might be really drawn to the technical aspects, and you might really like ATDD or mob programming or refactoring, or you might really be great at product development and breaking down user stories and working with the product folks. But for me, the part that I love the most is it's about collaboration and the human relationships that are underlying all of that. And so I was very inspired by that, and I'm extra excited to be here. I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've learned through some of my failures, which is the way that I learn the best, is usually in a fairly senior audience watching me fail. Okay. Actually, that rainbow, can you see this? This is on my way home from the Agile Games Conference. I was flying over my home in Charlottesville, and that was rain over mountains. And I took this picture of a rainbow from the air of the plane. It was like the coolest thing I ever saw, and how relevant. So I was talking about the various hats that Agilists wear, right? And one of the most important ones of those, one of the most important hats is the one of the change artist. In order to move forward with like organizational culture change, right, is really hard. And even team level culture change is really hard. And continuous improvement is at the heart of Agile and is all about constant change. It's all about the willingness to change. And very often we're expected to find kind of clever ways of bringing people along with us in the changes that we're asked to get them to make, and help them figure it out and kind of own it in the end, right? And that's a huge challenge. It's a huge process. It's not just a once and done, like we roll out this change and now we have change and we move forward. There's frustration and resentment, and we do it for a little while and we roll back and we try something else, and it's like this back and forth thing. And people need like a lot of support and a lot of compassion and a lot of connection and the time to take that. That's the hardest part of my work, and it's also the most rewarding. So if you're anything like me, you've experienced that pain and that frustration and that longing to help people. So I'm going to tell you a story about a time that I failed and what I learned from it, and some of the stuff that I've been learning since, because I found my failure to be very, very interesting. My background in psychology is finally useful. I waited tables for a long time because degree in psychology. And now it's actually becoming useful. I'd like you to know that normally I speak with the dulcet tones of an angel, but I'm recovering from a head cold, and now I'm going for Harvey Fairstein. So just bear with me. After I tell you all the things that I want to tell you about, we're going to do a group exercise. And so you see the sheets in front of you that I passed out. There's no secret in the stuff that I'm going to tell you. I'm telling you what I'm going to tell you, and then I'll tell you. So those are the bullet points, the things that I'm going to talk about. I don't have anything to say about this. I just want to share that with you because I really, really like it. In 1969, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross created a change curve based on grief. And the book is called On Death and Dying, and you probably have seen some version of this. But what I found interesting about it is that the grief change curve is pretty much identical to the change curve. The stages that we go through when we're going through a change in our lives are very much the same things. And that's because change amplifies stress and discomfort. And we need time to work through all of those things. Our brains are adapted to repetition. So if you find something that works for you, and you do that over and over and over, that's very comforting to you. And our brains are actually hardwired to do that. And the older we get, this is true, the older we get, the fewer options that we have to try new paths, unless we're actively practicing that all of the time, because our brains want to do that and we find comfort in it. So what happens is, when you have this repetition of the way that you do things all of the time, and then something comes in and interrupts that, your brain interprets that as an error signal. Danger, Will Robinson, right? Something's not right, and it's scary. And you can get, have you heard the expression amygdala hijack? So the amygdala is the part of your brain that responds to like the fight or flight thing, danger. And when that is activated, your ability to have difficult conversations, to make good decisions, to take your time and be thoughtful is impaired. You're working with I'm going to get a little like psych degree here, but like orbital front cortex and the amygdala are related to each other, and you experience this as danger. It's about the regulation of emotion and your decision making. So what is it about change that's so scary? My hypothesis, and there's some literature that I've only just begun to scratch the surface of, is that change is an identity threat. This isn't the way that we do things in the brain. And it's scary when there's an identity threat. So let's explore that a little bit. Why is that so scary? What is identity? What do you identify as? It might be personal characteristics. You might think of yourself as an honest person. You might be funny or shy or creative or a problem solver. Right? These are personal identities that you may have. Or you may have identities that relate to your social context. It may be a family identity, or a mother or a father, or a parent, or a cousin. It may be your religion, or your race, or your place of origin, or your favorite sports team, or your job, right? That's a really powerful one. And I'm going to talk about that, Nancy, because I'll talk about it next. Your social identity is a state of belonging to the group, and you're going to have a lot of those. And what you think of yourself, the context that you experience yourself, is different depending on which group you're identifying with at any given moment. So that's kind of complicated. One of the first things that you ask someone that you meet for the first time, what do you do? What do you do? Who are you? So we relate our very jobs to our fundamental natures. And in the past, in the distant past, it's not even that distant, it used to be that you had a job that your father had or your mother had, and you do that job. So cobblers made shoes, or maybe, yeah, cobblers make shoes and coopers make barrels, right? So your last name is related to the work that you do. And that tells you something about your place in society, right? It tells other people something about you, what it is that you do, what your socioeconomic status is or whatever. But now, in the modern age, we actually have this additional layer of complexity in that many of us have more options to choose from than we did before, and the work that we choose to do says something about who we are because we're making the choice to do that kind of work. And that's not obviously the case for everybody, but there's an element of that now that didn't used to be true. So we have this sort of subtle expectation that we choose your work, and that reflects your values and your dreams. So what happens when that's threatened? An identity crisis is so serious. What happens when we lose our jobs? Who am I anymore anyway? What is my value? What is my worth? What am I bringing to society? How am I helping? How am I providing? It's not really just about money. It is also about money, but really, like, if you read the studies about that particular thing, money is a concern, but way, way more than that is this fundamental feeling of worthlessness. If you can't identify with that thing anymore, it's stripped from you. And that's true in other ways too, right? Like empty nest syndrome, right? Your identity as a parent, now what do I do? Right? Divorce? Who am I in relationship to my entire social context anymore? Military service. I was doing this same talk, and it was a little more less auditory-y and more, talky. And people were calling stuff out, and one guy said that he'd been in the military for 20 years, and he left the military. He had absolutely no idea what to do with himself anymore, a place and a role and a way and this whole context, and it was stripped from him. So we have this terrible grief and fear and anxiety and all that nasty, yucky stuff that goes along with that. We will do anything to not feel that. We will make all kinds of bad decisions. We will have bad interactions with other people. We throw up big walls. We curl up and, we'll do anything. If we feel that that's even a possibility, you get that. No. So when you're asking other people to make changes that feel like an identity threat, you can't be a BSA anymore. We don't have that in Scrum. That's not a role. So now you get to be a developer like everybody else. And you get that, you know where that's coming from. So how do we move forward with that? How do we help people with that? I talked a little bit about social identity. We look to other people to know how to behave in a context. And this starts with when we're really little, like babies, like toddlers watch the parents to know how to behave. It's how we learn as human beings. It's fundamental to our nature. It's hardwired, programmed in. So what fork do you use in the fancy restaurant, and what are you wearing to the party? Am I overdressed? Am I underdressed? Am I behaving like other people that are like me? And we are highly motivated to do the thing that the other people around us that we identify with are also doing. And it's very uncomfortable for us when we don't. Like, everyone has been in a position where they feel compelled to do something because the rest of the group is doing it. And it's way more comfortable to just conform than it is to not follow that group norm. We find that in organizations, when you have an established group norm that the people in the company align to, that they feel that they're a part of your organization, they have pride in the organization, and that I'm one of you, then these behaviors, you're less likely to leave, they're more involved in the job, they report working harder, they perform more organizational citizen behaviors, and they're more satisfied with their jobs. And that's the last time I'll read from the slide for you. But I think that's interesting research that you can leverage that. And I'll give you some additional context for that in a little bit. So these are the things that we're going to talk about. That's in your handout. Oops, that was interesting. Okay, those are the things. We'll come back to it. All right, so here's my story. I'm going to tell you my story now. I'm going to come up here and tell you my story. It just feels better to me not have this thing in my way. Because I'm going to be transparent with you. So once upon a time, I was fairly new as a Scrum Master. I wasn't super, super new, but I was also not super experienced. Not that I'm super experienced now, but I was green enough that when I was given this complicated team that was just forming, I felt really proud of that. And I was going to help. I was going to be real helpy. I was all proud. And so this was a very complex team. This was people who were coming from 2 different parts of the organization to do a thing. We need to understand your thing so we can know how to put it in the cloud, right? So we had 2 different groups with 2 different organizational identities. We had 3 folks in India who were contractors, who were totally new to the company and also new to the work and also new to Agile. And we had a couple of contractors that were on site with us, but they were also new to Agile. And the people that were associates had 2 different experiences of the Scrum framework, and one of them was really pretty new, and the other one had not. There was like 3 of them. Not such a great experience. Like it was Scrum-like, but it's a Scrum as a weapon, which you probably have all experienced, and that's very, very bad, right? So they were like a little skeptical to begin with. And I was going to show them how it was going to be okay. And I was going to help. So shu, ha, ri, right? Shu, wax on, wax off. You do the same thing over and over and over until it's deeply internalized. We understand this really, really well. Re, the next level. We get the thing. We can start to experiment with it and make it our own. And wait, that's ha. And then re is like the Zen thing where you just own it and you can do whatever you want and you don't even need the rule book anymore, right? So I was going to teach them how it's done. I thought that was my job. Really believed that that was my job. And so when I started getting pushback, I didn't really understand, because that's like, we're Agile now, right? That's the directive that the company is going for. We're Agile now. So what's all this about? And they didn't like grooming, and it can't be done, and you can't make the stories that small because it doesn't make any sense. You have to do the whole thing. Like, you've heard all this stuff before, right? And retrospectives were really, really, really bad. But I'm in a retrospective, and I'm getting that. I want to share this slide with you. Do you know Woody Zuhl of mob programming fame? His wife, Andrea, is a child book illustrator, and this is her work. And I love this picture so much. And that's exactly how I felt in this moment. So I'm standing there in this room with this whole team of people looking at me, hating the fact that they have to do retrospective because it's stupid, and it's just a waste of time, and they just want to get back to work. And I'm standing there like, this is my job, and you're supposed to love this. It's like my gift to you, right? And I'm not kidding. I actually did this. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath and imagined that my feet were like the roots of a tree going into the earth so that it wouldn't be actually bowled over by the force of the resentment of the people in the room. And I was like, look, I don't know what to tell you. This is how it has to be done. And like, we just left. Like, it just fell apart. And I cried. And I went to my Agile coaches. And I said, oh, my wise Agile coaches, what do I do? And my coach said to me, why don't you let them take something really small and change it? And write their own acceptance criteria for how that aligns to the original thing and how that meets the intent of what, and then let them change it. And in my heart and my belly, really, I felt this like this fear rise up in me, and I was like, that sounds insane. They hate Scrum. They're just going to do away with it completely, right? They're just going to throw it in the trash. If I let them experiment with it, I won't be teaching them the way, and they'll just go way off the rails. And in the moment, I realized that was happening, and I just kind of took another breath, and I was like, well, that's interesting. And I kind of observed that in myself. I'm like, I don't trust these people at all. Let me go off to this conference. I'm going to leave for the conference the next day, right? This is my first Agile Coach Camp. And I went to Agile Coach Camp, and I'm talking to this guy. He was a kind of famous guy. I didn't really know who he was at the time. So I wouldn't have been so comfortable having a conversation with him, but I'm nervous with him. And I'm telling him, what's wrong with these people? Why are they so resistant to change? Why are people so resistant to change? And he said, people are not resistant to change. That's a myth. And I said, really? They're not resistant to change. They're resistant to coercion. They're resistant to being changed. And that idea went straight into my head and right into my heart and changed my world forever. That's the heart of everything that I do from now on. Everything else that I'm going to tell you about in this presentation aligns back up to that. This is the most important thing I've ever learned. And then after Agile Coach Camp was Agile 20, whatever it was, and that was like a week long of everything aligning to this for me, and I was just like singing this song the whole time. Like, it just totally blew my mind. And while I was there, I sent an email to my team with a meeting invite. It said optional. How Julie screwed up and why she's so excited about it. They all came. And I said, I'm so sorry. I believe that Agile is the truth and the light and the way. And I do. I believe that. But that's my religion and it's not yours, and I was imposing that upon you, and that's offensive. I'm so sorry. I thought that that was my job, but really my job is to help you figure out what you need in order to do your work the best way that you can for you. So tell me, what's the thing that you hate the most? And they said, grooming. We hate grooming. I was like, okay, what do you hate about grooming? And they said, well, we spend like the entire time talking about just one story. And the truth is, 3 of us used to be BSAs, and we're really, really good at understanding this work, but the rest of the people are Java developers, and they don't know anything about the company, and they're just wasting their time in that meeting. And we spend the whole time talking about just one story, and then we get into planning. We don't know what to do. What we really want, I said, okay, what do you want to do? And they said, what we really want to do is we want to go back and like actually kind of be BSAs again, but like do the thing that we do because we're good at it outside of this framework that you've told us that we're supposed to use, and pre-groom the stories and then bring it into the entire team and explain to them, and they can correct and add, and then we can do that. And I said, good, do that. And this seems so obvious to me. So their solution to crappy grooming was to add more grooming. But they did it in their way. They did what they needed to do to get the object taken care of. And my job was to make sure they had that. So, people change. They're not resistant to change. We change all the time. Okay, we get new jobs, we move to new places, we get married, we get unmarried. Ask me how I know. We do all kinds of really, really, really dramatic changes all the time, but it has to be on our terms. So now the team is happy. They're moving forward, they're communicating with each other, they own their own process. And I already said those words to you. All right. This is the first bullet point of my talk. I've already told you why. Give people the change. Let them have it. Esther Derby says, let them get their fingerprints on it. That's her words. Let them get their fingerprints on it. Let them roll around in it. Let them understand why. Make everything an experiment. Experiments are little in the context of your sprint. Try something small and see how it feels. This is a challenge for me because my default is to go Broadway. Look at you, you know me. I've known Mara for more than 20 years. She's laughing. That's like, I see the vision, right? And I want to go right for that. But people can't just do that. Like, you can't just get a whole room full of people to jump to your vision, right? It's not a little tiny. Measure it, talk about it, see how it works, try something different, and move in that direction. And that's okay. And if your leadership is telling you that it has to be all at once, then that's where you get to bring in your amazing, change agent skills and push back on them and be compassionate and help them understand how people need to do it a little bit at a time with understanding the vision that we're trying to get to. Let it be small. This is the autonomy part of motivation. You know the Daniel Pink talk about motivation, mastery, autonomy, and purpose is what really motivates people. It's not money. People like money, but that's not what drives you in your heart. Autonomy is a really big part of it, and the autonomy of the ability to self-organize and decide what you want to do about your own work is really key. So Martin Fowler, signatory of the Agile Manifesto, wrote, I'm going to read this. I said I wasn't going to read off my slides, but I'm going to read off my slide because I really like this. A team should choose its own process, one that suits the people and context in which they work. Imposing an Agile process from the outside strips the team of the self-determination which is at the heart of Agile thinking. This came from the very beginning. This is the start of Agile. We've gone in lots of different directions. We've got all kinds of frameworks now. We've kind of evolved, but truing back to the heart of it. So now, when I have a brand new team, and I start them off with the core protocols, and I totally do, I also start them off with, like, let's talk about what the manifesto even is. Let's read through it. Talk about what it looks like on you or doesn't right now. Is there anything in there that doesn't make any sense to you? Is there anything that's like just crap? Usually they're like, no, that sounds pretty good. I don't know how to get there. I'm like, it's okay, we'll figure that out. But like, if that seems like our vision together, then we'll co-create that and we'll move in that direction. We read through the principles and usually there's not, I mean, sometimes they go like, yeah, that's totally not happening right now. I don't really understand how we're gonna get there, but that's okay because it's still a good goal and they tend to agree with it. So once you have the rules of the game, then it's really easy to incrementally move towards that. All right, so here's the research part. Edit core narratives. What is core narratives? Core narratives is a catchy way of talking about the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. Who are we? What kind of people are we? That's your core narrative. This is the stable part of identity. Like, you're not the same person you were when you were 15, at least I hope not. But you still have a sort of stable sense of self, although it sort of changes a little bit. Like, who you are, that's the core, that's deep, right? Your core narrative. But that can change a little bit, just a little bit. So this is an experiment that I found very interesting. They took a bunch of little kids, like second graders, and they put them in a room with a bunch of different toys. And there was like, you know, Legos, and not that Legos aren't cool, but they were like, not like the robot that moved and talked and flashy lights. It was like a ball and like a little drum and stuff. And then there was like this cool robot. And they had two different groups of kids, because, you know, study. And the first group of kids, the researcher came and said, don't play with the robot. That would be very bad. I'll be really, really mad at you if you play with the robot. Anything else, fine, but don't touch the robot. And the second group of kids, the researcher said, but I would appreciate it if you didn't play with the robot. That wouldn't make me very happy. So like really mild condition. So who played with the robot? Well, the answer is nobody played with the robot. Nobody. I'm sorry? Yeah, they did what they were told. But why? So the second part of the study was they took the same kids in another study a few weeks later. And they gave them a video game and said, play the video game. If you make 35 points on this video game, you'll get a great prize. The game was rigged to stop at 33 points. Nobody got 35 points. So who lied? The kids in the extreme condition from the previous experiment were way more likely to lie than the kids in the mild condition. And the suggestion of the study is that these kids are telling themselves, and it's supported by all kinds of other studies, this is just my favorite one because it's cool. They're telling themselves that they obeyed the researcher because they're good kids who follow the rules, and not because I'm going to get in big trouble if I don't follow the rules. If I'm not going to get in trouble, I could do whatever I want. Like, I'm not going to get caught. And so this is the difference between compliance and internalization. And that's very important for your change efforts. You can get people to comply. You can tell them the new rules and they will do that thing. But as soon as you're not in the room, they're not going to do that thing anymore. You'll go on vacation. Are they going to have that retrospective without you? I'm just saying. If they internalize that, this is who we are now, that's much more likely to happen without you there. Another study with kids. A story of who we are. They had 3 conditions in this study. We have a control. There probably was a control in the other one, but I don't remember reading about it. So the first condition is the teacher hangs a sign in the room that has the rules about keeping the classroom neat and tidy. These are how, this is, you know, we clean up every single day and we put our toys away and this is what we're supposed to do. And the principal came in and did a whole lecture about how important it is to keep the classroom nice and tidy. And so then there was another condition where no prompting was happening at all. Like, they didn't talk about being tidy at all. And then the third condition, the teacher hung a sign that said, this is Mrs. Johnson's neat and tidy classroom, and oh, we're so neat and tidy in this classroom. And she constantly reinforced that this is who we are. Not this is what we do, but this is who we are. And the principal came in and said, wow, what a neat and tidy classroom. You guys are just rocking it in here. I can tell you take so much ownership for the things that are in your classroom. I love how much you care. and reinforce that message in that way. And then they gave all three groups a little puzzle. They had this sort of very easily thrown away kind of plastic wrapper. And so the kids peeled the puzzle apart and they did the puzzle, and the wrappers went on the floor. But the kids in the control condition and the kids in the I tell you what to do condition, 70% of those wrappers hit the floor. And in the kids in the this is who we are condition was only 15%. This is who we are. So when I'm working with organizations and we're trying to get to, like, I don't know, close stories in Jira at the end of the sprint, right? It's always a thing. We got to close the sprint. And you're always like sending emails. Everyone's got to close the sprint because reasons, right? If you send the message about how well managed your organization is and how proud you are to be so well managed in your organization, stuff like that gets a lot easier. Link the change to identities that they already have and just shift it a little. They're already a part of their group, right? Your people are already, they're on their teams, they're on the art, or like I'm assuming safe is a word, but you know, like they're a part of the bigger organization. So link the change to the organization that's already there. You can shape it. Doesn't have to be drastic. All right. Haven't lost my voice yet. I'm doing all right. Activate existing personas. On the island of St. Lucia, there is a parrot. In 1977, there was only 100 of these parrots left. Beautiful bird, very specific to this island, doesn't live anyplace else. And there was a college conservation major, he was a senior, and he decided that he wanted to try to save the St. Lucia parrot. And he got a grant, it was like $200 a month plus room and board. It was like all the money that he had to make this change. And instead of, you know, telling everyone why they shouldn't shoot and kill the parrot or trap the parrot as a pet or whatever else is going on there, what he did was activate the personas of the people living in the island. This is our parrot. We're so proud of our parrot. And he worked like at the grassroots level to get the people of the island to, they made little stickers and they passed them out in the stores, and they had a band that made a song about the parrot, and they had a guy dress up in a parrot suit and went around in parades, and he was like the St. Lucia parrot, and they had t-shirts printed up. So it was like this big grassroots thing that took place. But what happened was the native islanders became so proud of their parrot, and the people who were visiting there all bought the shirts and became this big tourist thing, right? And there's hundreds of parrots now, and in 2008, which is when the thing that I was reading was written, no one had shot a parrot in 15 years. It made me think, I was in New York City, I don't know, in April, I guess. And I'm walking down the street, and I was with a friend of mine, and she had a cigarette, and she just threw it in the ground. And this is like a New Yorker. This girl is like the New Yorkest. You know, remember Courtney? The New Yorkest, yes, New Yorker that ever walked the face of the earth. And she just throws her cigarette and walks away. And I'm like, I wonder if there's some way to like activate the pride of New Yorkers, which is like no other place, I think, maybe in the entire world, as fierce as that, to like keep their city clean. Like, throw your cigarette on the floor, what is that? So I just feel like that's the kind of thing that you can do. Like, invoke the pride of the people that are there. Make them proud of it. In 1990, a man named Jerry Sternin was working for an organization called Save the Children. And the mission is to fight severe malnutrition in rural communities in Vietnam. And the Vietnamese foreign minister had seen guys like him before come in, like outsiders come in and they try to like save everything. And it's never effective. So he gives him 6 months. He's like, you can try, whatever. I'll give you a little bit of money and you can try. But Jerry Sternin knew that the roots of the malnutrition were much, much, much bigger problems than he could solve in 6 months. They were things like poor sanitation and poor hygiene and like education and poverty, and he can't fix that in 6 months. So he considered that information true but useless. TBU, he said. So what do? He traveled to the villages themselves and asked the experts in each village, where are there places that the kids are more better nourished, better nourished than in the other places. The experts are the mothers, right? They know where the kids are suffering and where the kids are doing better. So he went and he talked to the mothers, and what he found was that there were in fact places where the kids were healthier than other places. And so he asked them, what are you doing that's different? And there was a cultural norm that said that little children weren't able to process complex foods, and so they were just kind of eating rice, right? And they'd have like one big meal a day of just rice. But in these little pockets of what he called bright spots, the parents were feeding the kids more frequently, little smaller meals, more frequent, and the soup pot had sweet potato greens and brine shrimp from the rice fields, and they would dip their ladles down, way down into the bottom of the pot to make sure the kids were getting the protein and the nutrition that was going into their soup. And they were better nourished. So the next step was to put those mothers in they had this big, like a hut in every village where all of the mothers would come together and communally cook. And so they taught each other. So he wasn't like the white guy come to save the day. He was like respectful and finding out where does this thing already exist and how can we have those people teach each other, right? So now you're not like the savior, you're just helping to lift up what's already there. I like this because when I am working in organizations and I have pushback, especially from leadership, like the teams are kind of doing their thing and they've been doing it for a while, but leadership is like the ones going, yeah, I don't know about that, right? If you find another leader at that same level in a different organization that's already doing that, you can put them in a room together and you can either moderate or just get out of the way, right? And they'll talk to each other about it and they'll inspire each other and they can share, like you don't have that perspective, right? You're not that person at that level in that organization. So your voice is kind of meaningless, right? And you can get that a lot easier, but that peer is gonna be a lot more effective. So this is another like gentle, respectful way of affecting change without like beating it into people. Oh, and there's the other picture. That's not really a picture from Vietnam. That's just one I saw on the internet that thought I looked pretty good. Gets the point across, right? All right. I'm still struggling with this title. Bob Galen told me it wasn't a good title, and I respect him a lot, but I can't think of a better way to put it. When you have an existing persona, it's kind of like editing core narratives, but like core narratives is really, really deep. And this is like just kind of behavior. It's not as deep as that. It's just the way we do things, right? So researcher called Robert Cialdini, who does a lot of work in the field of influence. He's got a book called Influence, which is, I'll tell you about later. Good stuff though. You know, the researchers, they went to the neighborhood and said to people, are you willing to put this big ugly sign in the front of your lawn to have our, support our Drive Safely campaign? And people said, no way. Like, this is like a, 4x4, like huge ugly sign. No, of course not. But in a nearby neighborhood, they had 4 times the success rate with getting people to put that big ugly sign up in their front yard. How did they do that? A couple weeks before, actually it was 10 days, I'm looking at my notes, 10 days earlier, they asked the same people, will you be willing to put a teeny tiny little sign in your front window for the safe driving campaign? And they said, sure. So when they came back around to those same people later, they were much more likely to do the big thing because now we are people who put up signs for our neighborhood. Does it seem devious? It's a little bit devious, but it's not evil, which is different. I had this big conversation with my father about like manipulation and influence and like those, like it's manipulation, but if you're not like evil about it, then it's okay. So there's maybe another lecture in the future about ethics of influence. Consistency is helpful in this. Subsequent behaviors are easier to influence. If you can get them to declare it publicly, it's more powerful. This is also Cialdini's influence. So when I'm doing information radiators, is a public way of talking about the work that the team is doing, and they're more likely to conform to their sprint goal, right? If they hang it up on the wall, this is my sprint goal, they're more likely to work towards that goal than if they just said it in the meeting and it doesn't happen again, right? So hang it up. And having them write it down is even better. if they write down their commitment, it sticks even more. They found if you go to a dentist's office and they write the appointment card for you, versus they give you an appointment card to fill out yourself, you are way more likely to attend that appointment if you have handwritten that card yourself. Isn't that crazy? But it's true. So when I am working with a team and we're coming up with like team norms and working agreements, I'll write it all up in the flip chart and I'll have them sign it. Which sounds a little, kind of sounds a little heavy-handed, but it's not hard to do it. And they get the point of why they're doing it, so there's not usually a lot of, pushback on that. But the impact of having signed their team norms is like a really deep thing in their heads. They feel a much higher level of commitment to that thing now that they have signed it. So another interesting point, leveraging group norms. So we talked a lot about that in general, right? But this is like the summary point about that. You've been in hotels and you've seen the little sign that says, please reuse your towel and save the environment. It's good for the environment, right? And that's kind of effective. You see that note, you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't throw my towel on the floor. But if you say most hotel guests reuse their towels, it goes up. You're a guest in this hotel like other people are a guest in this hotel. And so now you have a group norm that they're going to comply to. Not just please, but like other people are doing it too. But if you say most guests in this room reuse their towels, your compliance go way up because you're identifying not just with the entire hotel, but with like this room. It's crazy. Aren't our brains crazy? Like we are such machines. We're like so programmed socially. It's so interesting to me. But right? So another example, in the petrified wood forest, they were finding that people were stealing pieces of petrified wood to bring home as souvenirs, and they obviously wanted to put a stop to this practice. So if they did nothing so let me back up a little bit and talk about how they know. They took pieces of petrified wood and like marked them. So they were like put them like someplace really obvious, so it would be easy to steal. And they had like little markers on them so they could come back around and count, right? That's how they gathered the metric. So if they did nothing, about 3% of people were stealing petrified wood. But if they put a sign that said, please don't steal the petrified wood, it's not good for the environment. Don't do that. That was okay, right? That helped. Please don't steal the, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't do that, right? Other people will suffer, and it helped. But if you said, many people have stolen petrified wood in the past, what do you think happens?
More steel.
Way more steel. Other people are doing it. So if you don't want them to do a thing, don't tell them how many other people are doing the thing. Tell them how many people are doing the thing and tell them about how it's growing. So to go back to like the closing the stories at the end of the sprint thing, I don't go, man, like 60% of you have not gotten your stories done. I'm like, we have this new norm and 40% of you are already conforming. And the next sprint you go, wow, it's 45 now. In just one sprint, we've already changed, and I've only had to send out one email. And so now you start talking about how other people are doing it. That's a lot more powerful. This is the workshop part. This information is on your things, but I've summarized it here because I've done this before and gotten feedback that it's confusing. So I'm going to talk through it, and then you have this for reference, and then you also have it on your sheets for reference. I'm going to pause for questions before we get into it, but I'm also going to like kind of give you an overview of what we're about to do so you have time to wrap your heads around it. Okay? So we're going to self-organize into groups of 3. So kind of just like eyeball the room and see who you're going to target to be in your group. Okay? And we'll do this in a minute. You don't have to do this right now, but this is coming. Okay? You're going to get in groups of 3. And before you start talking don't do it now because we're going to talk some more. I'm just giving you notice that this is coming. Okay, so what's going to happen is that you're going to you may sit together and acknowledge each other and go, hi, person in my new group. And then just take a breath and think about some of the stuff that you just heard in the previous, whatever I was talking about, right? What really resonated for you, and where do you think you have a place in your job right now that you might be able to use some of this? And just jot a couple notes down. You'll get 3 minutes. And then we're going to you'd actually talk to each other, and one person goes first, and you take 3 minutes to tell them about it. I'm in this I have the situation, and this is what I'm dealing with, and this is what I think I might want to try. And then 3 minutes distributed between the other two people. Like, it's not like 3 minutes for one person to talk, and then they have to stop talking, and then the next person talks for 3 minutes. It's like, you get 3 minutes for both people to give feedback to you, right? And they'll kind of like help you hone your idea and ask powerful coaching questions and all that good stuff, right? So that you can get your idea better. And then we'll just go around the room. Okay, so that's what we're about to do. So before I do that, this is time for questions, which might help you with your workshop. We have cool technology as little, yay!
So is it 6 minutes per person in the group, so 18 minutes, so it's 3 minutes?
Yeah, like you're gonna make you talk to each other for a while.
Okay. So just
And I'm gonna like
check.
drink some tea and I'm gonna watch you. So it's like 3 minutes for everyone to just like write their own ideas, and then we'll do the like talking to each other part where you get 3 minutes to talk and they get 3 minutes to talk to you, and then we'll rotate. Right? Okay. Other questions about anything? Go ahead.
Hi, so what's the subject that we're supposed to be brainstorming about and then talking about?
So anything that I have said in the last hour that you've gone, oh, that's a neat idea. Maybe I can use that in this situation that I have, and kind of like think about how that might play out, and then get feedback from the other people in your group on taking action on that thing. So this is like, I'm telling you all of this stuff, and this is a way for you to make it helpful to you.
Okay, I also have a question about one of your earlier slides.
Okay?
So when you were talking about the groups of kids and the toys and being told, don't play with the robot.
Yeah.
I guess it's not clear to me why the group that was told that they must not play with the robot would be less obedient in the future.
Right. It doesn't seem obvious, does it? And we think that if we're very, very clear and strict about the rules, that kids will really get it. So the idea behind that one example of lots of research really is that the difference between compliance and internalization. And so when you have just a little motivator, you tend to think that the reason that you're doing that thing is because you want to do that thing. So an example is, if you have a study that you want people to come participate in your study, right? And you say, I'll give you $100 if you come and be a participant in my study. I need to do some research. And you go to do that study. You'll do it because $100 is good. But if someone comes around later and says, will you do my study for $5? You're much less likely to do that, because you're not a study doer. You were doing it for the money. So if you offer them a little thing, like come to my meeting and I'll have chocolate, right? They're more likely to show up for the next thing that you do because they come to your meetings. But if you say, come to my meeting and you'll get this big reward or whatever, the next time you have a meeting, people are less likely to do it. And that's because they've got this narrative about themselves that they are people who do that thing. Like, I'm a person who puts a little tiny sign on my window, I'm more likely to do that later. So it's like creating a crack in that persona. Does that make sense?
So you're saying that for the kids who were mildly told, I prefer you don't play with the robot, formed an identity of being obedient kids?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
And I know with just one study it sounds a little hokey. It's just one study, but there's like a lot of research. It's actually called the minimum sufficiency principle. I said that well. Okay. It's hard to say. Minimum sufficiency principle is the name of that phenomenon, and that was just an example of how that happens. If you give them a little tiny incentive, then you're doing it because you really want to, because the incentive isn't big enough to make you do it. Or the punishment, it works the other way, right? The punishment isn't big enough that, like, if you do what you're told, it's not because you were going to get in trouble. It's because you're a person who does what they're told.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm glad that you asked that, because other people have had that question in the past, and maybe I can get more specific about it. So thanks. Yeah.
So I didn't quite understand the fourth one, the create cracks in the existing persona. Is it some ways contradicting the third one, which is activating existing persona?
How is it contradicting it?
Like if you are trying to trigger, you know, that resonate, activate existing persona seems to resonate to me, because that's kind of, you are kind of providing the stimulant, if you will, for people to explore and find within themselves the solution. To me, I didn't quite understand the fourth one, but the surface of it seems like is it contradicting? Because you're trying to activate their core, and then you're trying to find cracks in their existing persona.
Well, I think the way that I see it, I'm not saying that you're wrong, because I'm not sure I totally understand what you're saying, but what I'm trying to say is that there are different techniques for a given situation where you are trying to shepherd a change, right? And so one technique might be to activate a group norm or like a core narrative, right? And another technique might be take something that's already existing and then make a tiny, tiny little shift to it that will allow more to come in the future. Like Apple versus Mac versus PC users, right? Like I'm just a PC, I don't use any products at all. Like I don't get Apple, I don't speak Apple. But I did have an iPod, and the iPod was pretty cool, and it only worked with iTunes. And iTunes doesn't work, and like I have to use some products. So once you have that little thing, then you start to have more and more and more of that thing, right? So it's kind of like that. That's a crack, as in my persona as a what is this thing? PC user. I'm pushing 50. I lose words.
But let me ask you, wasn't that difference, activate versus create cracks, referring to different personas? Was that the differentiation between that? In other words, a persona where the persona led to a resonance or following the basic direction of the group versus, I guess, what's the difference in application? Is it different personas where you're activating an existing, or you're creating a crack in an existing?
So I think it's different levels. Depending on what you're trying to get through. So there's the core narratives thing, which is the story that you tell yourself about yourself, like who you are deeply, right? And then there's one that's about the social context, who you are within the group norm. And then there's one about how I do things, which isn't really quite as deep as who I am, right? And it's just different lenses for the same idea. Is that helpful? I mean, maybe it's too wordy.
No, it's just differentiating between those two tools, activate versus create cracks. They're talking at the same level if they went persona.
So if we go back to the Parrot example,
Yeah.
right? He wasn't really creating a crack. He wasn't changing who the Islanders thought of themselves. They weren't like now thinking of themselves as some other kind of Islander, like people who do things radically differently, or even a little bit different. They're like already people who love their place and who are proud of themselves as Islanders. They've just never really thought of the Parrot in that context. So he's linking that to the thing that they already are. It's not really a shift in how you think of yourself, but more about a practice that's linked to something that already exists. And another scenario is like, I'm not a person that hangs up signs in my front yard, as opposed to, this is a thing that you do. It's like a little thing. Does that make sense? The crack is kind of shifting the behavior.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right. You keep going.
One way of thinking about this, I think makes sense, is like judo, where you're trying to use the force or the action of someone else to do what you want.
You're using the force.
Using the actions of someone else, so the persona,
Uh-huh.
in order to get what the objective, get your objective. Reinforcing the things and they're moving in a direction, you want to push them more in that direction so they go farther.
Right, but it's not like a heavy-handed overhaul who you are, right? It's like an honoring who you already are, and just a gentle direction shift. Okay, I'll take one more and then we'll talk to each other, and some of your questions may be answered by each other, and then we'll talk a little bit more after we're done with the workshop.
You provided or you quoted many research in your presentation. Can you please provide the research that you quoted in the presentation?
Why, yes, I will. Yeah, so this presentation will be made in PDF format, available to you after the thing. And the last 4 slides, which is my contact, and these are some of the references, because, you know, you have a degree in psychology, they make you like do it like this. You know, so I printed them out for you, and I'm gonna have you, like, I'll pass them around. They're not stapled or anything, but like, you'll get that as well, okay? All right, so, get into groups of 3. 1, 2, 3, go. Right, we all, all right, I'm just playing. Okay, we need to wrap up because we have to leave the building at some point soon, but I want to hear from a couple of you who really feel like you're really onto something, you're really inspired, you've got an idea that you think you want to bring back to your workplace. Tell me what it is. Go ahead, use your...
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm doing is lobbying in the State House, and there's resistance to
There.
change, and the question was how to apply your ideas to get legislators to change and support a bill. And one of the things that I thought we could do is go to legislators and say, can you tell me why you think this bill is a good idea so we can put it up on our website? And so getting them to give us a quote that we can post on the website and attribute to them might well commit them more strongly to the idea.
That's beautiful. Good luck to you, and you're doing important work.
Thank you.
Okay.
My company.
Click the cool technology thing.
My company is. There we go. I work for a health insurer, and I work in DI with business reports for our provider network called Quality. And one of the things that we do in the reports is we compare providers to other providers in the network and say, hey, their admission rate is really low. What's going on with you? You know, it's to kind of put social pressure on them, and it works really well to try to improve quality of care for our patients, our members.
So my challenge to you would be, how do we take that same thing and put a positive spin on it and reward them for doing what you want rather than shame them for what they're not? Not that like your approach is not bad, but you're noticing a powerful force,
Yeah.
and we can use that to build our relationships and use that exact same thing in just a little bit different way. So that's, I'll make you think. What else?
My colleague had a question about how to proceed. He was talking about getting people to adopt XP as a practice, and was talking about the fact that he had some teams that were doing it and doing it successfully and could speak about their success. And the question was how to make other people in the organization feel that they were part of that. That is, the fear was, you know, having people talk, I'm doing XP and it's working great for me and I'm a great guy, give me a gold star, sort of excludes the other people who aren't doing it.
Yeah.
And how can he bring the other people along to include them and have them be part of the group that's doing it well?
Is that a question that you have for me, or is that a question you gave back to him?
Well, we didn't come up with an answer when we discussed it, so I'm asking you to help.
Well, lots of ways of highlighting bright spots, right? Where is it already going well? You could have him do a lunch and learn. You could have, sometimes finding someone else who's already interested and put those people, so those are your force multipliers, right? Is that someone who isn't doing it yet but is interested in learning, have them pair up on it, and then he can go back to his team and tell his team what he learned and how excited he is, and then that will start to grow like that. So that's one idea. I don't know if that's like the solution, but like that's a thing.
I was the gentleman he was talking about. So at my company, one thing that we're really trying to emphasize the importance of is
XP practices, not as a mandate, but something that is really a good thing. Most people associate XP with just pair programming.
Yeah.
It's just a misconception. It's one aspect. So what we some of the ideas we came up with was, have XP champions. These are evangelists that are developers themselves, peers of everybody that people look up to, and have them evangelize and lead communities of practice themselves as a way. Another avenue has been creating a network of starter squads. These are squads or teams that have themselves volunteered to adopt XP practices and willing to embrace it for 3 sprints and share their learnings to everybody. So it's kind of like taking this kind of small graduate instead of saying, thou shalt do it, coercing everybody to do it all at once. We're not doing that. We want to start small. We want to have evangelist peers. And then, but the one thing that resonated with which says, having people say, I am someone who believes in equality. I am someone who believes in continuous integration, collective code ownership. I am that person, and then everyone will want to be.
Yeah.
So that's
yeah.
But the thing that we were talking about was, so one thing I was going to do is there are some success stories, and I want to highlight them. But these are your peers. They're succeeding. They could say, I am better off now than 6 weeks ago because of such and such. And I don't want it to be a backlash where people are saying, well, they think they're elitist now.
Right. So maybe, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm thinking about some of the stuff that I was just saying. So maybe to talk about, instead of like singling out those people as like the bright stars, right, and then making everyone else feel left out, is to talk about how your culture is a culture of experimentation and of learning, and how much we do that here, and that's one way in which it is happening. And then the people who try it, highlight that. Look at these experimenters that are trying the new thing. Not like, look at the guy who's really fabulous at doing something that you can't do, but like, look at the person who put themselves out there and tried something new. That's so indicative of who we are, right? I would love to talk to you all for a really long time, but I babbled too long before the workshop, and now we're running out of time. So this. I want to keep talking, but we have this space, and we need to honor that. And love you. Bye.